Hello guys, so people are joining my live. Thank you so much. Today I was solving some problem related to library app. So I thought coming live and explaining you guys how that works. So this is the library app flowchart where we have to use the front end as a Angular, Reka server, API gateway, these things. So these things I don't know, I'm going to learn now. Just give me 2 minutes. Just a minute, I'm logging into some app. I cannot show that screen, that's why I'm showing keyboard. Don't mind. I have to go through these.
Let's set up a brand new Spring Boot project from scratch with Spring Security that works with database authentication using JPA in connecting to a MySQL database. I'll walk you step by step through how to get Spring Security to connect to the MySQL instance using JPA and authenticate users against the user information stored in that database. The primary objective of this tutorial is to have a Spring Security application connect to a database, a MySQL database using JPA and get user information from there so that when somebody's trying to authenticate, it's going to check if that user is available in the database and check if the credentials are correct, right? So I have this MySQL instance locally that I'm signing into with the MySQL CLI, and I have a database instance called Spring Security, right? And in this database, I have a table called user. I can do a select start from user, and here you see there is a single user available in the system, right? So this is a user table that I've created with a bunch of columns. There's a column called username, there's a column called password, which obviously, as you can tell, stores the username and the password. There's an active column, which indicates if the user is active or not. I have one record in this table, which has the username as user, password as pass, and active is set to true. There's also a roles column, which I intend to be a comma-separated list of roles that a particular user has. This is usually not the case in a real-world application. You would typically have like a separate table for roles and authorities and all that stuff and have like a foreign key reference. But for the sake of this video, I want to make things simple, so I've just added this comma-separated list of roles in the roles column. For this one user that I've seeded into this table, I just have one role, which is role underscore user, right? So this is the single user we have in our system. What we want to do is create a Spring Boot project from scratch, add Spring Security in there, and have Spring Security connect to this table and this database in this MySQL instance using JPA, so that when I log in with the username as user, the password is pass, it's going to come query this table, get this record, and then validate it and say, okay, this is a good user, and then I should be able to successfully authenticate. This is the objective of this tutorial, right? So let's see how to do this. I'm going to start by creating a new Spring Boot project from the scratch using start.spring.io. I'm going to enter my group name as io.javabrains and my artifact name as Spring Security JPA, right? So this is my Spring Security JPA project. And now I need to add a bunch of dependencies here. There are a couple of obvious dependencies that we need to add. Since it's a web application, I need to add Spring Web Starter, and I obviously need Spring Security Starter. And since this is going to be using JPA, I'm going to add the JPA dependency as well. Now, when you're connecting to a database, you need to install the driver for the database you're connecting to. In this case, I'm using MySQL, so I'm going to choose the MySQL driver. I'm going to add that here as well, and now I can generate the project and open this in IntelliJ. Now here's my project open in IntelliJ. Switch to the packages view here, and the first thing I'm going to do is create a resource class, right? So I need to create a couple of APIs that can be accessed in order to verify if the authentication is working fine, right? So I'm going to make this a REST controller, and I have essentially three APIs. The first API is mapped to the root URL / and this I intend to be accessible to everybody, whether people have logged in or not. I want this to be publicly accessible, and I'm going to add that here as well, and now I can generate the project and open this in IntelliJ. Now here's my project open in IntelliJ. I'm going to switch to the packages view here, and the first thing I'm going to do is create a resource class, right? So I need to create a couple of APIs that can be accessed in order to verify if the authentication is working fine, right? So I'm going to make this a REST controller, and I have essentially three APIs. The first API is mapped to the root URL / and this I intend to be accessible to everybody, whether people have logged in or not. I want this to be publicly accessible, and I have a /user API, which I want to hide behind an authentication wall, right? I want people to be able to authenticate before they access it, but then once you're authenticated, irrespective of whether you have a user role or an admin role, you should be able to access this /user API. And then I have a /admin API, which I want to be accessible only by somebody who has an admin role. So someone has to authenticate first, and they need to have an admin role to be able to access this, right? So now I need to set up the authentication and the authorization part of it, right? Spring Security is already a part of the class part because you've added it as a dependency. But now, how do you configure Spring Security? You do that by creating a class that extends the Web Security Configurer adapter. So I'm going to create a new Java class, and I'm going to call this Security Configuration, right? And this is going to extend the Web Security Configurer adapter. If you're not sure what this is, you need to check out this tutorial that's showing up in the card here, where I talk about all this in detail. And once I extend this class, I can create a couple of methods here, which lets me access some core Spring Security objects. And using those objects, I can tell Spring Security what to do, right? So the first method that I'm going to override is this configure method, which takes in the authentication manager builder. As you can imagine, I can use this authentication manager builder to configure authentication. And here, I need to tell Spring Security to say, hey, this authentication needs to be through connecting to JPA and getting data from the database using MySQL and all that stuff. I'm going to not do this for now. Let me set up the authorization first, and then we'll get back to authentication. Authorization is by using another configure override, and this time I'm using the configure which takes in HTTP security. And here I'm going to paste this block of code which sets up the authorization for different APIs. We have three. Bond goes, dude, I nearly died where James Bond is trying to get into the bad guy's hideout. The bad guy has his hideout super secure with multiple levels of security. Bond defeats one level, gets a little inside the hideout, and then there's one more trap. He defeats that, and there's one more. And finally, he defeats all of that and encounters the bad guy who says, welcome, Mr. Bond, I've been expecting you. And James Bond goes, dude, I nearly died right at trap 1 and I barely made it through all those levels. How the heck could you be expecting me here? See, that's the thing with security. You just cannot put up one layer of defense and say, okay, I've done my job. When you want to secure a system like a web application, you have to put a lot of thought into it, build multiple layers of security, and even anticipate that some of them might get hacked. So you need to think like a James Bond villain is what I'm saying basically. But for those of us Java developers that are the good guys, there is Spring Security. In this video, we will learn what Spring Security is really all about and why you might want to consider using it for securing your web applications.